Hello, everyone. Welcome to Season 5, Episode Lucky 13 of the Overseas Famous Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Owens. Show brought to you by Loot Mogul, an athletes-led sports metaverse powered by virtual real estate academies, games, meta shops for brands and fans within real-life rewards. Check out lootmogul.com. So, great episode planned for you today. We have Matt Morgan. Matt, the Blueprint Morgan. Matt is a former collegiate basketball player, ended up becoming a professional wrestler where he achieved incredible success. Also, his DNA is on the International Space Station because he was deemed such a physical and appropriate specimen to continue the human race had, in the case that we ever get eradicated or something like that. But Matt had a really good interview, talked about his college career, talked about his wrestling, had a really good stories with his dealings with addiction and painkillers, and some of the funny stories of meeting Vince McMahon for the first time, and who he hung with in professional wrestling, because he was around during that golden era, like that. He was kind of in right on the end of the Attitude Era into that John Cena, Brock Lesnar era. So it was really cool to talk to him about his experience. And now he is going on to American Gladiators, and now he is into politics, which he discusses a lot. But it was a really fun interview. Matt and I went to school at Monmouth. We never were there at the same time, but I knew people. He had left a year or two before I arrived. So we had that kind of connection from Monmouth where he played basketball as well. But Matt was a tremendous interview, really fun guy, very interesting guy, and 7 feet, he said at one time, 380 pounds, and he was just all muscle. Talked about his diet. So these are a lot of fun times on this interview. So without further ado, Matt Morgan on the Overseas Famous Podcast. Here with Matt, the Blueprint Morgan. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today to talk a little bit about your career. We're excited to have you. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's cool to see you, bro.
It's great to see you. So Matt and I both share the Monmouth University connection. Matt played there for the beginning of his college basketball career, but it's fun to see a lot of times how good you are at wrestling, but also how great you were at basketball too, or are at basketball. I don't know. I always say were because I can't do much anymore, but
Yes. Yeah, especially now, I'm now the mayor in the city of Longwood, Florida, hence the monkey suit. But I mean, I can still shoot. Put a ball in my hand, put a gun to my head and make me shoot. I can still shoot. But good Lord, the rest of all those other, fast, quick fibers, twitch muscles, whatever they were called, those are shot. I ruined them with weightlifting, if I'm being honest. I got so addicted because I got to Monmouth my freshman year. I was tall and skinny. And Coach Wayne Zoke at the time wanted me to obviously beef up and get bigger. And it was a different ball game from high school now to college, especially Division I, right? And so I got married to the weight room over that summer between my freshman sophomore year. I put on like 45 pounds of muscle, and then I got very addicted to that feeling, being able to look in the mirror and see your hard work play out in front of you. And then that later on, years later, I mean, I got up to like 382, just a friggin' horse. Obviously, that's unhealthy being that big, but I was very young at 382. I was in my early 20s, and I just loved it. I got very addicted to wanting to get bigger and stronger and things like that. So, yeah.
Was there something that was different between Monmouth and Chaminade?
Yeah, sure. So when I transferred out to Chaminade, I transferred because I didn't want to have to sit out a year. One of the options when I was ready to transfer out of Monmouth was, I believe it was Drexel, Fairfield University, my hometown, Iona, in Manhattan. But pretty much Mac schools now that I think about it. But I didn't want to sit out a year because I knew if I would have to sit out a year with my attention span and being so immature at that time in my life, right? I was so immature at that time. I don't know if I would have, gotten in trouble or do dumb things or, not focus on basketball maybe. Right? So knowing myself enough, I transferred out to Division II Chaminade University. And so for that, we didn't play an NCAA tournament. What we did is we host Chaminade. One of the reasons I went there was because they hosted every single year, still right now, the Maui Invitational Tournament. And why that's huge is because, like you just said, we got to play my first year there, the #1 ranked Duke Blue Devils. So I'm in the starting lineup playing against, at the time, Elton Brand and all these other, at the first time in Duke's history, they started freshmen in Elton Brand, Shane Battier, I want to say William Avery, um, just a stud lineup. And they just kept throwing 6'10 at you, 6'10 at you, 6'10 at you. And they wore us out. But I wanted to go there because I still had, hoop dreams and maybe wanting to play professional. And I thought if I could play in 3 national televised ESPN games, one versus Duke, one versus Syracuse, and the other versus, I believe it was James Harden and Arizona State in our third round. It's going to be better for me, right? So that was a big attraction to want to go there. Besides the fact that, oh yeah, P.S. it's Hawaii. How bad can Hawaii? I ended up meeting my future wife, so it ended up being the right place and the right call.
It is incredible. We got Duke a little bit later in the 2001 tournament in Monmouth.
Oh my God,
we took on. Yeah, we got that Shane Battier senior year. He was something special. That was a tough team, but going into, I think the biggest thing is you look at some wrestlers who are very tall, and there's some of them had basketball background, but when you look at that transition from basketball to wrestling, what was it? What was the reasoning? You talked about, okay, playing here, maybe I want to pursue pro basketball. What was it that you were just like, all right, wrestling, I want to try this wrestling?
Oh my God, lifelong dream since I was 6.
That's
6
awesome.
Watched every Saturday morning, probably like every other boy in the 80s,
yep.
Right? And just didn't know how you got involved in it. And this was back still when the business was very protected. They didn't just come out and tell you, hey, there's a wrestling school here where you can learn how to swing a steel chair and hit your opponent. You didn't have something like that. So I went the traditional sports route and thinking maybe one day I'd play professional basketball. But when I went out to Hawaii, I met a bunch of different people that were pretty connected with wrestling out there. They have a very, very rich lineage of wrestling in Hawaii. And so when I graduated finally, I was bouncing at a bar. God, I think it's when I graduated. All I know is this WWF Raw magazine writer walked into the bar at the time that I had been bouncing at during the summer times. Because when you're playing under NCAA scholarship, remember, we couldn't work a real job during the school year. We could only work during summer times to make money. So I bounced at nightclubs during the nighttime, and during the day I would work paving roads for my city in Fairfield, Connecticut. So in walks this magazine writer for Raw magazine, and he looks up at me. He's like, "Holy crap, how tall are you?" I'm like 7 feet. And he's like, "Did you ever think about being a pro wrestler?" I'm like, "Yeah, what kid has?" And he's like, "Well, Titan Towers is two towns over from here, and where I was from in Fairfield, Connecticut, in Stamford, Connecticut." Long story short, he had me start coming with him to the weight room there at WWF at the time, before it changed to WWE. And I ended up running into Vince McMahon there in the gym one Friday night. And that opened up this whole, Pandora's box of connections and them wanting me to get started. And then finally, they told me to audition for this new reality show that was going to be coming out on MTV called WWF/MTV Tough Enough. So I was supposed to be casted on the first one. I don't know what happened. All I know is that I ended up getting casting on the second season of it. And that's when I was like 382. I got really big and too big, way too big. And I probably made it through halfway through that show, but it gave me a lot of great, national exposure. This was back when reality shows were still on MTV. and they were actually viewed and watched. So this was like prime time hours, right? That this show would come on right after the real world. So tons of carryover viewers, and that helped me get my name out there. I did good enough to where WWF called me back, even though I got hurt on the show and had to go home. They still signed me to a 3-year deal anyway. And that started my whole wrestling career, what eventually morphed into an almost 13-year career.
Wow. I also still watch the challenge. That's my MTV reality show. And I still watch regularly every
I
week.
used to
So
love that.
your wrestling career, you have this long, illustrious wrestling career, but they always talk about like that grind. Like I always talk about overseas basketball as a grind. You're trying to kind of get to that level, but it's a grind. So take
Yeah.
us through that initial grind where you're trying to reach that pinnacle of the WWF or WWE, and you're wrestling down south in some smaller leagues. You're
Okay.
traveling the world. What was that?
Bro,
Take
there
us
is no,
through that.
and no disrespect to any other sport, but there is nothing close to the grind of pro wrestling because we're 5 days a week of every month of every year. There was no off season. So I would see my wife on a Saturday, half of a Sunday. I'm out on tour that following Sunday evening. And then I would see her again until what, Friday morning, Saturday morning.
Wow.
So that's not easy. Keep in mind. So your body takes a beating, number one. It's why you see so many, not anymore, because they've corrected it. But in my era of coming up, my come up in pro wrestling, they sent you to Ohio Valley Wrestling in Louisville, Kentucky, where they teach you how to own your craft, how to learn your character development, most importantly, how to work, how to do this, how to perform. And so that part wasn't easy because that's 8 hours a day of being slammed on your neck, on your back. And I always tell people, you ever see like a little scrawny guy be able to karate chop through all these bricks? You're like, how the hell that scrawny guy just do that? Well, because he's developed, number one, a technique, and number two, callousness to his body in which he strikes those bricks. Wrestlers' necks and backs are supposed to be calloused like that. To eventually where if you were to punch me and I fall, you ever notice how we always fall the same way every time? It's
Uh-huh.
called that's called a back bump. And that's not a trampoline we're landing on. That's real plywood and steel. And I found that out the hard way when I first started. And but it eventually, after a while, your body gets adjusted to it. And so, a long story short, it's also why the era before me, you see so many wrestler deaths prematurely, like all of our favorites growing up in the '80s, right? The Mr. Perfect,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Rick Rude, all these the Road Warriors, like all these guys that we really loved. You saw a lot of early wrestling deaths because of painkiller addiction, but they would combo it. They would take painkillers, uppers and downers, while abusing steroids, and potential alcohol added on top of it, depending on what the wrestler's addiction was. So you're essentially pressing the gas and the brake pedal at the same time on your heart. And if this was a
Wow.
car, what would happen if you did that? Your engine eventually would seize. And that's what ends up happening to a lot of wrestlers. So I was no different. I got bit by the addiction bug very early on. So my first year learning how to do this, and you got to remember when they sent me down to Louisville, Kentucky to learn how to wrestle, I didn't even have a year of experience before I got yanked up onto SmackDown national television, teaming with Brock Lesnar, who was the heavyweight champion at the time. I was in John Cena's very first storyline in which he became a good guy. Um, just cool stuff that I couldn't have even imagined in a million years happening to me, honestly, if I'm being truthful. But it did. And so with that, you don't want to lose your spot. You don't want to lose your position. And so when my back started getting, really, really injured on me, I mean, I lost my L5 still to this point, to this day. I need back surgery, but I'm never going to get it. And it's blown into smithereens. So when I sit for too long or whatever, that nerve will ride down my left leg and make me
Mm-hmm.
numb. Well, but it's livable. But back then, I didn't want to miss time off the road. So I started taking painkillers like the doctor prescribed. And boom, I got hooked 2 weeks onto that stuff. Legit, 2 weeks in on the painkillers, I started increasing all of my medication levels because I'm a big idiot thinking like, oh, I'm Matt Morgan. I'm 7 feet, 340 pounds. This prescription's for the normal guy.
Yep.
Arrogance, this complete arrogance. And that's part of addiction too, is your arrogance. Anyways, long story short, what made it worse for me, Kev, is that I was a fully functioning painkiller addict, which means I'm not drooling on myself. I'm not showing up late to work. I'm not making sense when I speak. And I was just as safe in the ring as I would if I wasn't taking those with my opponent and taking care of him. And so that made it harder for me to realize I had a problem. I'm on top of the world, right? I'm wrestling for championships. I'm main event storylines now. I'm on pay-per-view, all these cool things. So even more rationalization, I continue to develop and build for myself that I'm fine, especially when all these other guys around me are doing all this other massive amount of drugs that I wasn't doing. I wasn't abusing and doing all these crazy steroids and things like that. I'm just taking painkillers, therefore I'm okay. Like that was the thought process. And long story short, I would say maybe 4 years, 5 years into my career, I was on tour in Italy. I finally ran out of painkillers for the first time ever in my 4 or 5 years of being addicted to this stuff. And I was taking 100 milligrams of hydroxycodone every 4 hours around the clock.
Wow.
And that's enough to kill a small horse. And so, longer story short, I eventually called my wife, told her, I'm going to get off the store. I'm going to come home. When I do, you got to find a place for me to go to because I do need to get help. I give up. I'm sick of chasing this stuff. And so I did. And I almost took a year off and was ready to leave the business then. But that's what it meant to maintain my sobriety. Because when you get sober, that is your number one thing in life. It comes before everything.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you fail. And so I eventually got that ingrained in my head and got very competitive with it. When I'd hear people tell me, hey, don't forget, if you relapse, it's not the end of the world. I'm like, no, don't tell me that because I ain't relapsing. Watch. And I took the arrogance that I had that I'm the man of steel and I could take all of these painkillers and not die, right? And put it toward good use with being very competitive that I'm not going to relapse and I'm going to beat this and I'm going to be a positive story. And anyways, 8 months now into my sobriety, and I'm off the road completely from wrestling. I'm no longer with WWE at the time. My doctor's like, hey, look, you've got all these months under your belt. You're doing great. Don't you owe it to yourself and your family to give it another try sober? And I'm like, okay. I fought him at first because I didn't think I was ready to be in a locker room full of drugs and stuff still. But I built the confidence back up, and I went back. And if I would argue, if anything, I had a much more successful part of my wrestling career. Now sober, wrestling for TNA. It was called TNA Wrestling at the time.
Mm-hmm.
They were on Spike TV every Thursday night. They were at the time WWE's rival, and we had a stacked roster. And they put me in main event scenarios there, and I really enjoyed it a lot. And so very, very blessed.
That's a very inspirational story just to hear you tell, because it's scary that you resonated with me, because I always say the same thing. I'm like, oh, this medicine is for someone who's 5'10". I'm 6'10". I can handle a little bit more. Yeah. And it does. Yeah. You think that way because you're just like, well, modern medicine hasn't caught up to the height thing yet. So
yeah.
It's just a great story, and it's great to kind of hear. Was there anyone that, like in particular on the road, that you kind of that you went with more because there was so much other stuff going on?
Great question. So when I was with WWE, I hid my addiction. Not many of the guys knew that I was on these painkillers or abusing them, because again, I didn't have to go buy a black market or anything like that. I can go to any doctor's office with a signed action figure for their kid and I'd get 108 Percocets like that. And obviously showing that in my MRI as well. I don't mean to put all the heat on the doctor, but that was the truth. So I had like 3 or 4 different doctors writing me this stuff at the same time per month, which now you can't do, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm trying to think of those. I remember the whole selection of different guys. Kurt Angle. I even wrote Brock Lesnar my first time when I got called up. I mean, you name them, pretty much everybody at some point or another. Then when I got a little bit older, I prefer to travel by myself
Hmm.
because I like talking to my wife while I'm in the car driving, or I like to listen to not so much a cornball, but Law of Attraction and and audio books like that. Um, I'm very, very devout Christian. I like listening to that stuff. And equally as important, I want to go to the gym when I want to go to the gym and work out. I want to go to the restaurant that I want to go to. So I can eat clean.
Hmm.
Can't have abs when you're just eating Burger King every time. And some of these guys would just eat the worst food ever, but they could because they were on the gas. I
Yeah.
was I wasn't. I was always clean of that stuff. So I had to have a meticulous diet. Still to this day. If you see me today, my wife and I both compete in men and women's physique shows one time per year at age now 46. And,
Incredible.
you get your diet cleaned up, you can do a lot with your physique.
It's really true. I feel like as I get older, that's the one thing that you never, it's weird because our metabolism was so young. So as an athlete, you were just kind of like, all right, I can do this. And then I retired from playing. I'm like, man, I was like, I can't eat this anymore. I was like, things aren't the same. My body's feeling a little different today.
Yes, you're right. No, you're right. You do little things to trick your metabolism, like fasted cardio in the morning, or you know what I mean, high intensity interval training, where you
Hmm.
sprint for balls to the wall for 30 seconds and then a minute and a half of steady state cardio, 30 seconds of sprinting. You do that for 20 minutes in the morning. It's essential. It's like essentially taking a fat burn.
Yeah.
It starts your metabolism like nothing else.
It's nice to see that, athletes, I always tell athletes and clients that we have, you have to kind of monitor your diet now, because when you retire, if you're used to a certain lifestyle,
Huh.
it's going to continue. So your mind has to be right now, so that when you're done, it's like, okay, I got this. I got my
Yeah,
diet under control. It's just so important.
yeah, yeah. And then I've also had these I have like 4 or 5 different action wrestling figures, WWE figures of me made over the years, and in cartoons or video games. So like for the rest of my life, I'm always gonna have people seeing those photos, right? So like
Yes.
I've got to do my best to at least maintain. You know what I mean? And
It's
so,
true.
well, not to sound like narcissistic, but what's crazy is now, like you're saying, at our age, now we know more, and
Hmm.
I have a dietitian that works with me and sets up my diet every single week and adjusts it on the fly with my. But at our age, we actually have a better opportunity to put on more muscle or cut yourself up. Believe it or not, even on metabolism, because of muscle maturity, because of vascularity and things like that. So I want to bore your viewers with it.
No.
I could take what I knew now back to when I started my basketball career, because I would have been
Yep.
jacked coming out of the
Oh,
shoot if I had my choice.
I I always think back and I'm like, if I knew what I knew now, like
Right?
it would have 100% been in the NBA, because I was like, okay, I didn't know enough about my body. And I feel like it takes
Yes.
time to figure out what your body is good at, what your body can handle. And I know that now, but I'm like, man, if I knew it back then, it would have been a wrap. It would have been awesome.
Yes. Yeah, I believe you.
So the best thing, and you talked about wrestling is such a hard thing, and I always said, because you talk about like overseas basketball, and you're like, okay, you're playing a sport, you have to maintain your body and you have to adjust to new cultures, things like that. But wrestling, you're adjusting to new cultures, you're taking care of your body, you're performing your skill, but you also have to have the mental part. You have to have that ability to speak into a mic, the ability to to take a storyline along. It's like you're an actor as well, which is why you
Yeah.
see so many like Batista and The Rock, like getting into acting, because you really have to do that on a regular basis as a wrestler. Was that a hard thing to learn, or is that just, do you have an outgoing personality where it was easy for you?
It's weird because like those that I was friends with, like on the basketball team at Monmouth and things like that, they knew that personality. But like if you were a stranger meeting me, you would think I'd be pretty introverted. Um, you know what I mean? But it changed as I got more confident in myself, and a lot of that happened when I again transferred out to Hawaii, where again I still was super addicted to that weight room, super addicted to getting stronger with my lifts and then my body and things like that. so I can improve originally, so I can improve at basketball. But then it became, I want to try this wrestling thing and just continue to stay focused. So with that comes confidence, not arrogance, but confidence. I finally got very confident in myself. I started getting good grades. I started caring about school. Because until then, I was just going to college because that was just my 4 years of holding until I go play pro somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how I thought. But then as I got older, I realized how important that education was, and I had a degree in communications, and that was a godsend to me. My public speaking courses, my
Hmm.
nonverbal communication courses, and being in Hawaii, my intercultural communication courses
Wow.
were like legit a godsend to me. Because when I first got to Hawaii, nobody understood my sarcastic humor. Like, who is this wise ass, and why, why is he so mean? You know what I mean? That was like my wife's first opinion of me was like, God, this guy's got a weird sense of humor. Um, but she had never met a Northeasterner before. She had
Yeah.
never met that island before in her life,
Uh-huh.
except for like I think a softball tournament once in high school, but that's it. So all that served me well is my point. Getting older, and I'm glad I took it more seriously, especially my school. Um, but it all goes, like I said, with experience as we get older. That's right.
100%.
Yeah.
Now, you were in I think the coolest thing, which is something that, people talk about, oh, well, this wrestler got this or this person, but you are part of the immortality mission where they took DNA
Yeah.
from
Me.
Stephen Hawking and, all of these really, really, the brightest, the best, this, that, and that, and then they took you and they got your DNA because you are, and that like the blueprint. You're the blueprint for like a strong, you know, jacked up but like athletic human being, and that's just was that like a ridiculous honor, and how did that even
Yes.
come to pass?
And God, so I'm getting old. I forget times that I even did that. You know what I mean? One would think, like, really, Matt? Like, your DNA is at the International Space Station. You should probably lead with that. But yeah, honestly, that was pretty cool. And that came from me being an American Gladiator.
Mm-hmm.
2000 and I forget what the year, 2007, 2008.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a writer's strike, meaning now all the network TV networks like CBS, ABC, NBC, Fox, we're all getting rid of the written shows because of the writer's strike. It was a huge deal. And because of that, they were bringing reality shows to their television stations. And one of those that they brought back was American Gladiators. And Hulk Hogan and Layla Ali, Muhammad Ali's daughter, were the hosts of this new, bigger, better, stronger, faster version of American Gladiators. And once he got on it, he had told them about me because he saw that they were looking to cast for this character called the Beast, and he's like, I got the perfect guy, Matt Morgan. And so I got casted for it after having an audition and go to California for a couple of weeks on and off, in between wrestling those other 5 days a week, but mind you. And by the grace of God, they chose me. Again, didn't hurt that Hulk Hogan hooked the brother up, but I say that because that's how I got that recognition, or the for this billionaire gaming guy named Richard. There's Richard Garriott. Um, he's the one who has at the time enough money to be able to go in that Russian rocket that was one of the first to be able to go bring normal people, non-astronauts, to the International Space Station. And on his travel, he wanted to make a big hoopla about it and about his gaming system that he had. And he got different DNA swabs. And what they do is they send you this weird looking envelope in the mail. It's crazy. Like this silver, weird looking envelope, and inside it is a cotton swab. And you basically just swab the inside of your cheek, put it back in this NASA bag, airtight bag, and mail it back. And but it's all airtight. You can't get into it. It's crazy like how the technology that they used on this envelope, if I remember right. And long story short, there's a bunch of different athletes, different actors, different musicians of all different walks of life that were really good at something or whatever the gimmick was. And so, with that said, folks, if you see a 7 foot, 500 pound, weird looking alien walking around here one day, your
I
boys
know,
over
right?
here, and we're in trouble, and they got into it.
That's incredible. It's just such a cool thing to be able to say that, you are this DNA of yours is hosted in in space in hopes that,
ISS.
it's
Actually,
incredible.
ISS. Isn't that
Yeah.
crazy? And so Ferguson's like, what is so to really detail it a little bit more for folks that don't understand what we're talking about. It's because it is wild and it is crazy. And I thought I was being like ribbed. I thought when I first got this call, like people were my wrestling friends were screwing with me.
Exactly. Yeah.
I thought that. But anyways, what it is they now digitally, I think that they digitized our DNA, so and it's stored that way now
Okay.
at the ISS, if I remember.
Nice. It's
Yeah.
just it's such an incredible thing, and kind of like the last thing, uh you go from American Gladiators, and now you've gone into politics, and you're a mayor, and you've had such success. Was that something, again, was it like just something that kind of fell in your lap, or is that something you always wanted to pursue?
Definitely never something I wanted to pursue. I, brother, I hardly watch the news, let alone could tell you what political party I was in. That's the truth. I'm on the road all the time. I was all on the road all the
Yeah.
time.
Uh-huh.
My wounds on the 2 days I'd have off, and then back out on the road again. So that's the truth. But once I became a father, dude, everything changed. My prism, my view on everything, not just me, but
Hmm.
the whole world itself, like that changed overnight. I was, I always heard, things are going to change when you become a parent, but
Yeah.
I didn't go to that level, such a level that this switch went off in my head. The first time I held my son in the delivery, my son Jackson, um, I was supposed to be going back to WWE at the time, January 2014. I should have had another 10 to 12 years of my wrestling career with WWE easily. Um, and I was about to go back to re-debut with them for the Royal Rumble. I was going to be a surprise guest entrant. And I called them from the delivery and told them that I'm done.
Wow.
I appreciate the opportunity. I was looking forward to coming back, but I had no idea this emotion was going to come over me, and that I want to be here to be a present father for my little boy. And it ended up being the right decision because 2.5 years later, he was diagnosed as nonverbal autistic. And what was I going to do? Go on the road 5 days a week and put that onus on my wife to do? No,
Yeah.
that's not what you're doing. You're supposed to be a tag team. It's give and take, and you both tag team together to raise your kids the best way you can. And with my son, that's exactly what we still do to this day. So that opened up a whole new prism of how I started seeing the world. Who are making decisions in the environment? My little boy, your little kids are going to be growing up. And,
Hmm.
oh, wait, we have a Longwood City Commission that makes these decisions. Oh, wait, there's a guy that's been in office for 20 plus years. Screw that. No, um, that doesn't work. That does not work for me. That does not work for my neighbors. And once they heard I was giving it a thought, they all started putting like post-it notes on my front door and cards in my mailbox, which is illegal pretty much. Tell me you need to try this. Try this. The fact that you have no political background, Matt, makes it even better. And because you have like an international, whatever you want to call it, a platform, um, you're not going to be, pushed one way or the other. No one's going to be able to tell you what to do, except for us, your residents.
Hmm.
And that from day one on, I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw my name in the hat. I'm going to try it. And this was back in 2017. My son was now just diagnosed freshly as being nonverbal autistic at this point, right at age 3. And so I decided, instead of talking a good game, I'm going to be part of the good game and and then change the game and entered a world I had no clue about, except that I trusted my residents, that my neighbors and my citizens here in Longwood. We're 16,000 resident city. We're a small city. And so I went around, door knocked on everybody's door, told them my plans were for the city to progress it into the future and add some things to the city that we need. We need more parks. We need more social events in our city. We need to stop being the city that people used to drive through to get to the bigger cities to have things to do with your families on weekends. I'm going to change that. And me and my 4 fellow commissioners have done just that since 2017. We installed a 4.5 acre, $2.5 million Ryder Park that now has concerts on the weekend. Remember, this is a small city, keep in mind.
Hmm.
Splash pad, an outdoor amphitheater, a roof covered amphitheater. I mean, it's the largest green space for a park there is here in Seminole County. The park has everything, and it's now become the magnet or the donut hole, so to speak, of our city. It is an attractor. It's a magnet socially, And now we lead, in my opinion, Seminole County in social events now. Families come from all the other different cities far and wide to our city on the weekend to have a fun time with their families. Wow. And that's not because something I did great on my own. That's me doing what I promised these residents I would do from day one, and that's listening to them. That's your job as an elected official. Your job is to shut your mouth, open your ears, and be your residents' megaphone, their conduit, you know? And I really feel strongly about that. And what helped me along with that, because as you know, in your township, they call them in Jersey, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Not many people go to those township meetings or those town meetings, or city hall meetings. So unless they have a problem, they're pissed about something, pretty much. That's like that all over every city, right? But if I'm going to be getting feedback from residents, then I need them to start participating. So in 2018, I made us the first city in the Southeast United States to adopt Facebook Live, covering all of our commission meetings. And every decision we make as a city commission team together is on Facebook Live. You can go back to 2018 and watch every single one of our meetings. Wow. What we're paying our cops, all of our first responders, our city manager, negotiations for their contracts, policies, just general policies for our commission meeting, etc. And so, brother, because of that, I get constant feedback on what they want and what they don't want, they being our residents. And I'll never lose sight of that. That's what I think has made me successful, not having a political background.
Mm-hmm. Well, Matt, you have, obviously the blueprint physically, but a lot of people are finding out you are also the blueprint of, what a good life will be. And you've lived a great life and you've prioritized the right things. And it's really been a pleasure to sit down and talk to you, because you are the blueprint of what a human being should try to attain. So we're very grateful that you were able to hop on today.
Very flawed and trying to get better every day. I'm only halfway there, and so are you, Kev. We still got a whole nother life to go, my man.
We got a lot of life left, and we'll keep it going. We'll keep it going. But Matt, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the Overseas Famous podcast. We really appreciate it.
My honor. Love you, brother. Good talking to you.
Good talking to you.